Sir, she put something in your juice, said a small voice. Edward Voss didn't scare easily. At 52, the billionaire had built empires, real estate, tech, political influence. His name carried weight in boardrooms. His opinions shifted markets. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, Edward exuded control. Every move, every word, every signature, it all mattered. That morning, he sat alone in an upscale cafe tucked in the corner of an urban plaza. The air carried the scent of citrus and polished marble. Money, in its most invisible form. On the table before him stood a tall glass of orange juice, catching sunlight like a jewel. A $70 million deal awaited his final nod. Everything, as usual, was under control. Until that voice, "Sir, don't drink that." Edward blinked, turning toward the sound. Standing beside his table was a little black boy, 6, maybe 7 years old. His shirt was faded and rumpled. His knees dusty, hands clasped tightly, eyes wide. Not with hunger, but something worse, fear. Edward frowned. "Excuse me." The boy stepped closer. "Please." She put something in your juice. Edward glanced to the glass, then around the cafe. A waitress, young, red nails, dark coat, was walking briskly toward the kitchen. "You mean her?" The boy nodded frantically. She poured something from a bottle. "I saw her." She looked around first, then smiled real fake when she came out. The businessman's gaze returned to the glass. Just moments ago, it had looked fresh, clean, inviting. Now it looked off, a little too thick, bubbles clinging unnaturally to the rim that he didn't touch it. Instead, he stood. "Fussed." The boy flinched. "It's okay," Edward said, voice gentler now. "You did the right thing." He reached into his coat and dialed his assistant. "Get building security. Lock down the cafe. Now." Minutes later, the atmosphere erupted. Security sealed exits. Patrons murmured, confused. But the woman, the waitress, was gone. Footage showed her slipping through a rear exit 2 minutes before the alert. The glass of juice, still untouched, was rushed to a B in a back office. Edward sat with the boy and 2 guards. "What's your name, kid?" "Zion." "Where are your parents?" "My mama works here sometimes. She cleans upstairs. Said I could sit quiet in the hallway. I saw the lady pour the stuff in your drink. She looked scared. Then she smiled like nothing was wrong." Edward exhaled, the rush of adrenaline still heavy in his chest. The deal, the money, it no longer mattered. "You could have walked away," Edward said. "Why tell me?" Zion looked down. "'Cause my mama says to always tell the truth, even when it's scary." For hours later, lab results confirmed it. Antifreeze, laced with a sweet compound. A slow, odorless, lethal mix. Just one sip wouldn't have killed Edward right away. But within hours, it would have shut down his kidneys. He might have collapsed mid-flight, or alone in his penthouse. Dead. Untraceably, that he would have never known. But Zion had stopped it. The waitress was a ghost, hired as a temp that week. Her ID was fake. No social media, no address. Gone, as if she never existed. Edward, the man who controlled chaos, had almost been killed by a single glass of juice, and saved by a boy no one even noticed. That evening, Edward canceled his meetings and returned to the now-closed cafe. He asked to see the cleaning staff. There was Zion holding his mother's hand. She was exhausted, worn jumpsuit, calloused hands, tired eyes. As Edward approached, she instinctively pulled her son close. "Sir, I'm so sorry if he saved my life," Edward interrupted, voice cracking for the first time in years. He didn't bother me. He gave me everything. The story hit the news within days. Millionaire saved by homeless boy. But Edward never corrected it. Zion wasn't homeless, just forgotten. Like too many others in a world that didn't see them. 5 days later, Edward sat in his office, staring at the skyline. He'd survived boardroom betrayals, political sabotage, cyber attacks. But the closest he'd ever come to death was from a glass of juice in broad daylight. And the person who saved him? A child. Small hands, trembling voice, because my mama says to always tell the truth. That voice rang louder than any market alert. That be why the following week, Edward had found them. Zion's mother, Sarah Amani, worked odd hours cleaning office towers, including Edward's own. Her last permanent address was a shelter. No criminal record. No complaints. Just a hard-working mother raising a boy with more integrity than most adults. Edward didn't send a lawyer. He came in person. They met in a modest cafe. Zion clutched a red plastic toy, leaning into his mother. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quickly. "We didn't mean—" "You don't need to apologize," Edward said, sitting across from them. "I owe you my life. And your son. He saved me." Zion blinked shyly. "I want to do something for you," Edward said. "Not charity. An investment." Sarah frowned. "In what?" "In his future." That same week, Edward moved them into a safe, clean apartment near a good school. No headlines. No cameras. He created a trust fund for Zion's education. And then he went further. Edward launched the Truth First initiative, named in Zion's honor, supporting children who showed bravery, integrity, and moral courage in overlooked places. The ones who speak up when it's hardest, who shine light in silence. The AS for the poisoning. The investigation stayed open. Authorities linked it to a corrupt zoning deal Edward had opposed. Organized retaliation. A hit disguised as an accident. But the planners hadn't counted on the smallest witness near the service hallway. They hadn't counted on Zion. 1 year later, Zion stood beside Edward at a private foundation dinner. Not as a token, but as a guest of honor. Nervous in a white button-up, he gripped the microphone. "I didn't do nothing special," he said. "I just saw something wrong, and I said something. My mama says the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right." Silence. Then a standing ovation. Zion turned to Edward and whispered, "Can we go home now?" Edward smiled. "Of course." In the months that followed, Edward changed. Fewer meetings. More time at schools and youth centers. He walked without guards. And for the first time in decades, he began building a legacy rooted in people, not power. That Zion's story never faded. Not because Edward was famous, but because it reminded the world of one truth. A glass of juice can carry death, but a child's courage can carry life. And in the end, it wasn't wealth or strategy that saved Edward Voss. It was a little boy who simply chose to speak up.